So Rinpoche began by giving permission to the Sangha to leave because they have already offered a service. And then he continued by saying that this is the third time that he has come into the center, into Singapore. And he's very happy that he has the opportunity to meet again with all the students. And he sends out his warm greetings to everyone who is attending. Now, everybody who comes here in terms of individual students, but also the center as a group, as an organization, you are all very kind because you're offering great support to Gaden Shartse monastery. And therefore, this is what you do from your side. You offer this great support. And then if we see the position of the monks or the tulkus and so forth, those who are on the receiving end of such support, it becomes part of their obligation to fulfill the wishes of those who request Dharma teachings and Dharma explanations. And it says from amongst the different ways that we can repay that kindness. For example, it could be to make some pujas, make prayers, or give teachings and explanations. I remember saying, today, I'm here giving you these teachings with great joy, with great enthusiasm. So from my side, definitely, I have that spirited energy. But also from your side, it will be very, very beneficial if you listen in an attentive way, if you listen with great interest. Because this is the best way to study. And even if you hear something that you do not comprehend straight away, you always have the opportunity to go back and listen to that section again, then ask questions, request clarification of these points. And as you do this, of course, your understanding will improve. And when your understanding of the Dharma improves, then we see that naturally your mind becomes happier, you become more relaxed, and so forth. And therefore, if Rinpoche says from my side, I'm teaching you here today with great joy and enthusiasm, and also you listen attentively in this particular manner, then there can be great benefit from these teachings. So the great Lama Tsongkhapa has said, anyone who purifies negativity in their mind stream will easily accomplish temporary and ultimate goals. And therefore, since the purification of negativity is so important, I will explain it. So he begins by saying, anyone, all of us in our mind stream, we have both virtue and negativity. But it says anyone who engages in the process of purifying negativity, they will be able to easily accomplish their temporary goals. So temporary goals, we can say, they refer to this life. So let's say to have a long life, to have a life without sickness, or to have success in all your activities. And again, we can include in this not ending up with a rebirth in the lower migrations in your next life and achieving a higher rebirth, a virtuous rebirth in your next life. So all of these are goals, you could say temporary, immediate goals. And then we have the ultimate goal, which is obtaining the state of Buddhahood. So Lama Tsongkhapa says, if you purify negativity, you will easily accomplish temporary and ultimate goals. Why? Because it is negativity that is stopping us from actualizing any of these results. And therefore, he says, understanding how you purify negativity is very important. And for this reason, I will explain it. So the actual presentation and the actual part of these teachings is how to perform purification by prostrating to the 35 Buddhas. However, before we come to the actual part, we must engage the preliminary stage, which is setting the motivation. And in terms of setting the motivation, we need, absolutely, we need to have refuge and the mind of bodhicitta. So bring into mind that verse that of Lama Tsongkhapa that we mentioned before, where he says it's very important to understand how you can purify negativity, because once you understand this, then you can easily accomplish all the good things in terms of immediate results and the ultimate results. So think, I'm here to listen to these teachings today because I want to understand how to purify negativity. If I do not understand how to purify negativity, I will not be able to practice. My practice of this purification depends on my understanding. And the extent of my practice, whether it will be very extensive and so forth, depends, of course, on the time that I have available. It depends on my personal capacity and so forth. However, if I engage in this purification, I will notice that as the time progresses, my situation, myself, I will get better and better and better. And actually, in the future, I will be able to reach the state of Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. Therefore, with this thought in my mind, I'm here today to listen to these teachings. Now, usually, the tradition is that on the first day of the teachings, the first session, the teacher should allocate a lot of time on setting the motivation. But due to time constraint, and because you're all seasoned students and you have heard those things before and you understand those things quite well, I think this shorter presentation is sufficient. So we need to understand our current situation in terms of purification. As Rinpoche mentions in Lamrim, the middle length of the Lamrim, the negativities and obscurations of our three doors that are greatly abundant, they totally saturate our entire body. Therefore, it is especially important to engage in purification that continuously relies upon the four opponent powers in order to bring purification. So let's see the meaning of the verse. So it talks about negativities and downfalls, negativities and downfalls of our three doors. So the three doors are activities of our bodies, our speech, and our mind. And this does not just refer to the 10 non-virtuous actions. If we pay attention, we see that we have this tendency to always overreach in terms of our Dharma practice. So we come into the Dharma and we are new, and immediately we want to receive initiations. And when we take initiations, these initiations come with bodhisattva vows, they come with tantric vows, and we have this commitment. Now, on one hand, this can be very good because if you're capable of keeping these vows and commitments properly, then there is great benefit. But if you cannot keep these vows and commitments properly, there is great negativity. So the downfalls, negativities and downfalls. Downfalls refers to breaking vows that we are not able to maintain properly. So we have negativity, we have downfalls that we have created in this life, but it's not just that, because we have downfalls that we created in our previous lives. And therefore, Lama Tsongkhapa says, it is as if our body is completely saturated, completely imbued in those negativities and downfalls. Therefore, he says, whatever purification practice you do, whether you do some prostrations, whether you recite some mantras, whether, whatever method you employed, it's very important that you rely continuously on the four opponent powers, because this is the key point that brings about the purification. Okay, so One of the issues that we need to clarify here is the doubt that might arise in our mind. So if we rely on the four opponent powers, will we be able to purify negativity? So to resolve this issue, really we must look into the presentation of the law of cause and effect. So in the Buddha has actually explained that there are different types of phenomena. Some phenomena are categorized as obvious, manifest. Obvious or manifest phenomena are things that we can observe, we can settle straight away. There are other phenomena that are called slightly hidden. Slightly hidden phenomena are phenomena that if we employ logic and reasoning, and if we think in an analytical way through that particular issue, we will be able to understand them. And then finally, there's a third category, which is the category of extremely hidden phenomena. And this extremely hidden phenomena is not something that we can resolve with our logic. We have to rely on the statements of the Buddha. We have to accept the statement of the Buddha for that. And the presentation of the law of cause and effect actually falls in this third category of extremely hidden phenomena. It doesn't mean that we cannot study it. It doesn't mean that we should not make an effort to understand the law of cause and effect. However, it is very good if we approach this whole area of karma and effect with faith. We all know that in our mind we have virtue and non-virtue. Our teachers tell us, if you act in this way, you accumulate virtue or you accumulate non-virtue. But if you accumulate non-virtue, there is this and this method where you can purify it. The Buddha himself has actually given many teachings to that effect, explaining you accumulate it, but also you can purify it. And we can see that many great scholars and adepts and practitioners also say the same thing. And therefore, we can approach this area with faith in those statements that there are ways of purifying our negativity. This is very well illustrated in Master Nagarjuna's, in one of Master Nagarjuna's verses in the Friendly Letter. So the title of the text, the Friendly Letter, it indicates that Master Nagarjuna was writing a letter to his friend, to one of his friends, and the friend was the king of the Madgala. So there is a verse that says, "They are those who were careless in the beginning, but later they became very attentive and they were scrupulous with their ethics. And by doing this, they purified negativity." And he says, it is like Angulimala, Ajatasattu, and Shankar the Brahmin. Okay, so we have the example of, in this verse, the example of certain people who initially accumulated negativity, but then they purified it. The first one is called Gao. Gao was actually a monk. He was ordained, but he didn't really train in Dharma properly, and he have great attachment. And due to not being able to control the level of his attachment, he came into some very difficult situations and created a lot of negativity. However, later on, he developed interest for the Dharma and he practiced accordingly. And as a result of this, he became an arhat. The second example that we have is the example of Angulimala. So Rinpoche was saying, I'm sure you have heard the story of Angulimala. It is often mentioned within the context of the lives or the deeds of the Buddha, and you can see it also in many movies and so forth. Angulimala was very unfortunate because he met a very bad teacher, and that teacher told him that if you kill 1,000 people, you will achieve excellent results. So Angulimala went out killing people, and for every person that he killed, he would chop off their fingers and string it around his neck. So his name actually means the garland of chopped off fingers. Okay, so he had killed 999 people, and at this point, our teacher Buddha Shakyamuni intervened, appeared, and gave him some teachings. As a result, he became ordained, and then he practiced, and he also obtained the state of an arhat. Also, we can bring into mind the story of Milarepa. Everybody is aware of this story in the East, in the West. It's a very popular story. So when Milarepa was young, his father died, and his relatives, like his uncle and his aunt and so forth, they actually became very aggressive to Milarepa's family. So now Milarepa's family was reduced to the mother, Milarepa, and his sister. And they accused them, they mistreated them, and it ended up that the whole village actually exorcised them, because this is the way of the world. If the rich and the famous accuse you of something, then the average person would rather believe the rich and the famous than you, who is someone destitute or where you are down with your luck. And therefore, the mother, Milarepa, and his sister, they experienced great hardship from this treatment. And to amend for this, Milarepa sought a teacher to study black magic. And he became very good at this. And as a result of this, he could cause a big earthquake that destroyed the village, and he killed many people. Rinpoche was saying he killed about 33 or 37 people. Also, he could cause very strong hailstorms. And during those hailstorms, many animals, such as birds and other animals, were killed. Later on, he generated great regret for these actions, and he engaged in purification, and he even attained Buddhahood in that life. The other two names mentioned in Nagarjuna's verse is Ajatasattu and Sankara. So Ajatasattu was the prince of the king of the prince. He was the son of the king, and the king was reigning in the kingdom of Rajgir. So Rajgir, close to Bodh Gaya, was actually the capital of their kingdom. And the way that you would enter in that particular area was it was surrounded by mountains. So you had a ring of mountains enclosing the kingdom, and there were 4 doors. And there were only one way of entering and exiting. For example, when we enter a temple or when we enter a mandala, that we enter through one gate and then we exit through another gate. So it was their kingdom, and the capital had an arrangement like this, had a particular entry and exit. So the king had a very close connection with Buddha Shakyamuni. They were born at the same time, and they were friends. They were of they had similar attitudes, you could say. However, the son of the king, which is the person we are discussing, Ajatasattu, was really a very bad person, a very spoiled person. And he became very good friends with Devadatta. Now, Devadatta, who was the cousin of the Buddha. And the two of them, they fed on each other's negativity, and they were kind of like inspiring each other to do more and more negative acts. And as a result of this, the prince, the person we're talking about, eventually came to the point of killing his father. So killing his father, once you kill your father, this is one of the 5 deeds of immediate retribution. So it is extremely heavy. However, through engaging in activities of purification by relying on the 4 opponent powers, later on he became a stream enterer. The last person in the list was Shankara. So Shankara was married and he had a wife, but he had an affair with another married woman, and he was going to visit this other married woman, and his mother was trying to stop him going to meet this other married lady. So the mother intervened once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. At the end, he lost his patience because he really wanted to go and meet his mistress, and he killed his mother. Okay, so again, killing your mother is one of the 5 deeds of immediate retribution. And however, after that, he became a monk and he entered a monastery. But the thing is that if you have committed any of the 5 heinous crimes, you cannot be a monk. So once the monastery understood that he had killed his mother, they expelled him from the monastery. And once they expelled him from the monastery, he went into a very isolated area, and there he engaged in activities of purification and achieved, purified all the negativity and achieved the results of an arhat as well. Okay, so it is clear from these stories that although we can accumulate negativity, we can also purify it. And there are many means and methods for purification, but if we want to look for a method that is complete, is comprehensive, then this method must include the 4 opponent powers. This is something that the Buddha has presented in the Sutra of the 4 opponent powers. And in there, the Buddha says, even extreme negativity even the obscuration of extreme negative actions can be purified. So what do we mean here by extreme negative actions? Sometimes you might engage in negativity, but let's say your motivation is not very strong, or you might not carry out the activity yourself. You might pass it on to someone else. And if this happens, although it is a negative action, it is not the strongest negative action. But if you compare this to the situation where you have a very intense interest, a very intense motivation, saying, I want to do this, and you actually want to be personally involved and you carry out the activity yourself, then you understand that in this second case, the negativity is much heavier. So this is what the Buddha is referring in this sutra, where it says even this type of negativity can be purified. Okay, so let's look here at the 4 opponent powers. The first one is the power of the basis. Now, there are many interpretations or explanations of the power of the basis. However, according to Rinpoche and other eminent scholars, the power of the basis refers to refuge and bodhicitta. So that means that when you engage in the activity or the practice of purification, this is the type of motivation you should have. You should have refuge and you should have bodhicitta. You're all very familiar with these 2 subjects, refuge and bodhicitta, and therefore we do not really need to explain them here today. Then we come to the second of the 4 opponent powers, which is the power of regret. The power of regret is very important. So we can look at it through the example. So let's say you're really sick, and all you are thinking is, how can I overcome this illness? I want to be out of this situation, right? So it is like this. You recognize the mistake, you regret your mistake. And also, in our modern society, the way that our law operates is that if you have someone who has committed like a negative action, but they show regret for what they have done, then they are judged more lightly. If they do not show any remorse or any regret, then usually the judge will give a heavier sentence. So the remorse or the regret is very important. The third one is the power of refraining. If you have regret for what you have done and you're thinking, oh, I shouldn't have done this, but then you keep on doing it, you keep on repeating this action, this is not bringing you anywhere. So once you have regret, you should also have restraint that says, I will not engage in this type of activity in the future. And finally, we come to the fourth one, which is the power of actually applying the antidote. And in our case, this is the actual practice, which is offering confession and prostrations to the 35 Buddhas. As we said here, the first one does not need to be explained. The last one will be the actual part of this presentation. The other two in the middle, the second and the third powers, need to be explained, but Rinpoche was saying we don't have much time in this session, but he will continue and explain these middle powers as we continue with the sessions. Okay, so remember that Rinpoche started by giving us a verse from J. Rinpoche who says, therefore, continuously rely on the four opponent powers. So it is very important for us, whatever virtuous activity we engage in. So let's say you circumambulate, you do some mantras, you recite some mantras, or whatever, you prostrate, whatever practice or virtuous activity you do. If you do it in conjunction with the power of the basis, the power of repudiation, and the power of refrain, then it can become a complete action of remedy of purification that incorporates all four opponent powers. So although we say that these can be done in conjunction with any virtuous activities, we see that in Master Shantideva's The Compendium of Training, he mentions 6 types of activities that fall in the fourth type of power, which is the actual antidote. And also we see that Lama Tsongkhapa in Lamrim Chenmo also mentions those 6, and therefore those 6 are very important and we should pay attention to them. So in terms of fully applying the antidote, the list of 6 is: number 1, relying on the names of the Tathagatas. So when we do the confession of the 35 Buddhas, we recite the names of those 35 Buddhas, and this is an example of relying on the names of the Tathagatas. Number 2 in the list is relying on mantra. So this can refer, for example, accumulating the 100-syllable mantra of Vajrasattva. The third one is relying on sutras, which refers to reading various sutras as an antidote to overcome negativity. The next one, number 4, is meditation on emptiness. And this is actually the most effective and the most powerful. However, for us ordinary beings, because we do not have realization of emptiness, it will not have that effect. And for that reason, the other items in the list are things that we can engage more readily. Okay, so that was number 4. Number 5 is making offerings, and number 6 is arranging representations of the body's Buddha speech and mind, so like images, stupas, statues, and so forth. Okay, so now let's look at the text that we'll be relying. It is called The full title is the Mahayana Sutra of the Three Heaps, and the subtitle is the Bodhisattva's Confession of Downfalls. It is a teaching of the Buddha, and there are a few things we need to understand. In the current form that we have, you will see that in front of the name of each Tathagata, we have the word Tathagata. So to the Tathagata thoroughly destroying Vajra essence, I prostrate. To the Tathagata this, I prostrate. To the Tathagata that, I prostrate. However, the original form of the sutra did not have the word Tathagata in front of the name of each one of those Buddhas. Later on, it was amended to have the word Tathagata uniformly through all the names of the Buddhas. It is called the Sutra of the Three Heaps. So heaps here means actually three sections, because the first section is the section of confessing negativity. The second section is the section of rejoicing, and the third section is the section of dedication. All right, so the first section is confessing negativity, because as we say, negativity, it is what hindering us, and therefore we want to confess it and we want to remove it. We want to get rid of it. Second one is the section of rejoicing, because when we rejoice, this increases our virtue, and therefore all the favorable conditions also increase along with that. And finally, we have dedication, which is appropriate in any occasion, in both cases. And of course, again, it has this effect of increasing all the positive and virtuous aspects. So in the remaining 5 classes beyond this one, we will actually engage the sutra in detail. There are a couple of things. So we say that the subheading of the name of the sutra is the Bodhisattva's Confession of Downfall. This sutra came about because someone asked the Buddha, do the Bodhisattvas, once you become a Bodhisattva, is it possible to accumulate negativity? And the Buddha replied to that, yes, it is. They accumulate negativity. But had the Buddha stopped at that, a lot of people would have been shocked to hear that bodhisattvas accumulate negativity. So immediately upon making that statement, the Buddha continued saying, but there is a method for the bodhisattvas to purify their negativity. And the best method is the Mahayana Sutra of the Three Heaps. And therefore, speaking the Mahayana Sutra of the Three Heaps is an expression of the Buddha's affection for sentient beings, because had he not clarified this point, there would be great despair amongst disciples. Now, in terms of the main text that we rely upon is, for reference to this practice, is the Bodhisattva Ways of Life and the Compendium of Practices by Master Shantideva. So we mentioned before the reference from the Compendium of Practices, but the Bodhisattva's Ways of Life says, if you recite 3 times a day and 3 times a night the Mahayana Sutra of the Three Heaps, then all downfalls will be purified. Also, the Master Atisha made a statement when he went to Tibet that if you do not make the prostrations in the morning and recite the Sutra of the Three Heaps, and you don't make the prostrations in the evening reciting the Sutra of the Three Heaps, you pretend you are a Buddhist practitioner, but in reality, you are not. So it's a very clear, very definite statement. Now, if we want to look at the, let's say, one of the earliest texts that were translated into Tibetan, It's the ritual for doing water purification. The second one is Samandabhadra prayer. The third one is the Heart Sutra. And the fourth one is the Sutra of the Three Heaps. And actually, we see that the Sutra of the Three Heaps is existent and translated not only in Chinese, in Indian, we find it in original Indian language, of course, the Sanskrit, and in Tibetan. And with regards to these texts, because it is such an important practice, often you hear the following expressions. One way that people refer to it is that only we have it. And when you hear an expression like this, only we have it, is an indication that whatever the people are referring to, they consider that to be very important because they take a kind of like possession of this, like we have it, only we have it, and we consider it very important. Together with that, usually there is another expression that says everybody does it. And when you hear this expression that says everybody does it, this should make you think that I should also do it. And if I don't do it, and if I'm careless and I just sort of like not pay attention to this practice, then that will be a great omission and a great fault. When people say everybody does it, and we have this practice, is because they really stress how important it is. So Rinpoche was saying, I will not give you now any new information, but I would like to summarize the meaning of what I have already talked about. So the main thing to keep in mind, it is very important to purify negativity, because negativity is what does not allow us to further develop our qualities. Negativity is an inhibitor of qualities, whilst virtue gives rise and increases and enhances our qualities. There are many people who think, well, in this life, I am not very sick, I don't have any big problems, I don't have any catastrophes, and therefore probably I don't have big negativity in this life. But don't be fooled thinking this way, because as we mentioned, there is a lot of negativity that we carry, we have created in our past lives. And in this life, we have the excellent opportunity to practice and purify negativity. It is very difficult to guarantee that in the future as well, we will have such an opportunity to practice Dharma in the way that we have it in this life. So Rinpoche was saying, look at your example here. You, in this life, you're born in Singapore, which is such a progressive country, and you have all the opportunity to practice or to follow your interest in a very open and relaxed manner. So even if you want to study Dharma, you want to practice Dharma, you have the full freedom and you can do it in a relaxed way. There are many countries, many people in other countries who do not have that freedom, who cannot pursue religious interest in this way. So there's no guarantee in the future we have this opportunity, and therefore we should practice it now that we have it. So the way that we purify negativities is by relying on the complete set of the four opponent powers. Even the name of those four things, they are called powers, opponent powers. And when you hear the word power, it indicates that it is something that has a lot of power, it has a lot of capacity within it. However, for a proper purification of negativity, we must have the complete set of all four. So depending on the way that we think, depending on how enthusiastically we apply ourselves to the four opponent powers, perhaps we can reduce the power of our negativity, or we can reduce the number of our negative actions, or if it is really powerful, we can really eradicate it from the root. If we do not have the complete set of the 4 opponent powers, we can still harm negativity, but it will not be effective. It will not be like a total antidote that really takes care of this situation. So from the stories of the 4 individuals that we gave before, we can see that when one engages in the 4 opponent powers in a full, intense way, negativity can be totally removed from the root. So remember that the Buddha has said that there are these and these ways of accumulating negativity, and there are these and these ways of purifying negativity. And there is this sutra, which is the sutra of the 3 heaps, and you need to employ this. Even it purifies the bodhisattva's negativities. If you accept one of these statements of the Buddha, it is important to accept, to be open to accept the remaining statements of the Buddha. So just to go through the list of the 4 opponent powers, the first one is the opponent power of the basis that refers to refuge and bodhicitta. The second one is the opponent power of repudiation. That means we generate regret for whatever was that negative action. The third one is the opponent power of restraint, meaning we make the promise not to do it again in the future. At least we should have that attitude that says, I will not do it as much in the future, or I will not do it as often in the future. Once you regret it, you will want to make the promise to avoid it in the future as much as you can. And then with the first 3 in place, then whatever virtuous activity you engage in, it will become an antidote that purifies negativity. However, as we have seen, the Buddha in various sutras has mentioned 6 particular methods of that become the antidotes, and from those 6, the first one, which is relying on the names of the Tathagatas, is the one that is relevant to the Mahayana Sutra of the 3 heaps. Remember that this is a practice that is universally considered to be very important and very beneficial. So when we come across something that is esteemed as being important and beneficial by all, if we ignore it, then it is inappropriate. We will be at a great loss. So Rinpoche would like to stop here for tonight.